Hey, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Soul Focus Radio. This is your host, Martin Friedman, and I am really excited to be here to introduce part 2 of the conversation around active listening in relationships. So sit back, enjoy the rest of my conversation with Ragivah Mahdi. Here we go. What I hear you saying too, because I think this is really crucial. What I hear you saying is that's really all any of us wants desperately, is to be seen
That's
and,
that's what a
and to be
voice wants.
accepted and held, right? To be accepted and held exactly as we are, to be seen exactly as we are, not even as we present ourselves, but as we actually are,
Right.
right?
It's
So
like,
listening and communication, it's not a small thing.
no,
It's a huge thing.
it's a very huge thing because the whole entire world, every being in this world is moving based upon communication inside their head.
Mhm.
So, what the world does is fills us up with all sorts of messages that becomes our internal communication, that becomes the cause or the influence driving us to do the things we do. And sometimes we never learn to listen beyond those programmed messages that we received as children. And when we learn to listen beyond those programmed messages, we hear our voice. And we hear that inside of us is infinite intelligence that knows exactly where we're going, why we're here. But you got to learn to listen to that voice beyond the programmed voices that the world put in your head. So listening to yourself is like so important. I remember Martin, I used to pray all the time.
Hmm.
Used to get on my knees and do the ritual prayer, and I'd
Mhm.
pray and I'd pray and I'd pray and I'd pray. And one day, I heard the voice inside of me say, "Man, shut the hell up.
Hmm.
Do you not think that an infinite God would know what you need before you open your damn mouth anyway?"
Hmm.
And it says, by the way, stop asking for stuff because you're asking for so much stuff you'll never be able to experience this in your lifetime.
Hmm.
Just know that this divine being that you think you're talking to know all the stuff already.
Hmm.
You the one that needs to listen to what you're saying. So I stopped asking for anything. I ain't asked for nothing in 20 years.
Mhm.
And because I haven't asked for anything in 20 years, I've been getting everything. Because I ain't been doing all that chatter getting in the way of the vibration of my pure voice, which is always in tune with the divine, with the infinite divine. We are one with the infinite divine all the time. Every night when we lay down and go to sleep, our spirit gets up and go work on what we desire and why we're here. It has never strayed from its course. The only thing that has ever had the opportunity to stray from its course is our mind through our ego.
Mhm.
But our
Mhm.
spirit has always been on path and will always be. So when you get back in tune with it through listening to yourself, you get back in tune with your power.
I think you're saying something really crucial here, Mahdi. I want to really highlight this because, what I hear you saying is that it's really about listening and not praying. That when we pray, we're asking for things, but the key is that the messages are being given to us all the time, and we just need to listen. And I want to say that, there was in kind of what I call my return to Jewishness, which is very different for me than Judaism, because the Judaism is the ideological, organized religious part of it. And for me, I'm more interested in the spiritual part of it, which connects me to all other spirituality, right?
Right.
And so I had this rabbi, and one of the things that he said that's always stuck with me is he said that, the creator, the universal presence, however you want to say it, the infinite being that we're all connected to is always communicating with us. And he used the example of like an old transistor radio, right, with the knobs on it.
Right.
He said it's our job to tune in. We're not going to get answered by just asking questions, but our job is to stop talking and to tune our internal knobs so that we can actually be in tune with the messages that are coming to us all the time.
Right. And that's so beautiful when you think about it. That's a beautiful thing. So as you're listening to this podcast, how many of you still ask for stuff? You're constantly asking. That's your idea of what prayer is. I'm not saying it's wrong. What I'm
Mhm.
saying is, how many of you still do it? How many of you still are petitioning and asking for stuff? And just notice how the time it takes for you to supposedly get your prayer answered. The reality is, as soon as you start tuning into the infinite voice that exists within yourself, then you start getting in alignment with it already happening, because it has already happened for you, but you're not listening to get in tune with it to know exactly where it is. There are times when I get up and I'm tuned into myself, and self would tell me to go someplace that I even had no intention on going, but I trust it. And I would go there, and exactly what I've been looking for is right there.
Hmm.
Or somebody would show up that I needed to help me get to the next level. They would show up, bam, out of nowhere. Why? Because I'm in tune. I listen to myself. Some of us are starving to be listened to by other people as adults. And listen, you have an opportunity to reparent yourself. And the
That's
way
right.
you reparent yourself is by listening to what is behind what you've been saying to other people, even the things that you lie about. Why do you lie? Think about that for a minute. Why do you volunteer lies and people don't even ask you to lie? Why do you exaggerate? Why do you perform? Why is
Hmm.
that? What is behind that? What you will find is behind that is fear. Fear. And what are you afraid of? You're afraid of people to see it. Your ego got you to believe that you should be afraid of people seeing who you are. Do you realize when people see who you are, for real, they're going to fall in love with you? Because they're yearning for the same thing. I like what John Gotti said. John Gotti says, I don't lie to nobody because I ain't afraid of nobody.
Hmm.
That's the only reason why we lie, because we're afraid. Think about that. And think about the vibration that comes with fear. You going to live all your life afraid? Are you?
I think the answer, if people are being honest, is unfortunately, I think a lot of us would say yes. Yes, we are, because, I'm so glad you brought this up, Mahdi. The role that fear plays in communication
Oh,
and
wow.
and in listening, right?
Right,
I mean that's something we don't talk about very much, but the fear that we have of being embarrassed, the fear we have of being wrong, the fear we have of of people seeing the parts of ourselves that we haven't even really like fully examined yet. I mean, there's so much fear that most of us operate on. So that's why I said if most of us were being honest, the answer would be yes. Most of us will communicate from a place of fear or not communicate because
right.
of fear,
Now think about this, Martin. Let me ask you this question, and I'm asking this to the listeners. What
Hmm.
conversations are you running from right now? What conversations are you so super afraid about that the moment you see those conversations coming, you turn and walk the other way? You avoid people who bring those conversations with them. You know those people who bring that conversation and you avoid them. Like, for example, the race conversation. White folks have been avoiding that conversation forever. What are you afraid of? You cannot change the reality of what happened in the past. You cannot. So why are you afraid of the conversation? It can only grow you. It can only grow you if you listen to it. You can only become a stronger human being by listening to the things that you are afraid to hear. That is the way we become stronger human beings. There's a conversation that we are afraid of, and we face it. And then guess what we discover? It wasn't at all as bad as I thought it was. And then you start growing, you start getting bigger because now you faced your demon. Are you going to be a slave all your life? That's what we become, a slave to the fear of certain conversations that we don't want to have.
I mean, that's heavy. I'm going to let that sit with our listeners for just a second. I mean, that's a heavy concept, my D. That
What's
really
that?
is.
What's that?
Well, the heavy concept that we're a slave to our fears,
How could you
that,
not be? Because I
yeah,
mean, the kind of fears we're talking about is not even real fear. It is virtual fear.
right,
You know,
right. And there's an illusion that where I think it lies heavy on people is because we have this illusion. Many of us, for many different reasons, have this illusion that we're in control of our lives in ways that we're really not. And I think that that's what the fear is based in. I think a lot of people think I don't have anything to be afraid of in my life for a variety of reasons, but yet their actions still show that, as you put it, they are a slave to fear. I think you said they're virtual fears, but there's also like an illusion, a virtual illusion that goes along with it that is not allowing people to see it. And I think it's heavy, and I think it's going to land heavy on people because I think it's a level of realization that many people, most of us, don't have for most of our lives.
Right. When I say virtual fear, I mean it is your imagination working in reverse. In other words, you are imagining the worst outcome behind something that is like a conversation or something, or a look or a perception. Your
Right.
imagination is working in reverse. Instead of you imagining the best outcome, you keep imagining the worst outcome, which scares you and it keeps you away from what you need to face. Real fears only happen to like 2 to 5% of our entire lives. A real fear is when your life is truly threatened by something and you have to respond. And that is more innate, it's more instinctual. And you will see that you don't have that kind of image when you in the throes of real fear. You're just moving, you're in motion, you are doing something, you're acting in that moment. And that is not it's not an image that you see, it is action that you take. But a virtual fear is all imagination working in reverse. So your imagination, which is a problem solving mechanism in your mind, is not working right. So you running from your fear means running from solving the problem. And you keep kicking the can to your kids, to the next generation to solve the problems that you are afraid of standing up to. Why are you running? You're running from a conversation. Can you believe that? You're running from a conversation. There are some parents that don't talk to their kids about sex. They put it on religion and their religious beliefs. It's because they're afraid of the conversation. They're afraid to talk about sex with their children. Imagine that. Really start sweating. I'm going to be honest with you. I remember the first time that, I had to talk to Naja about sex, right? The first thing we did was got her a book, an anatomy book about the body. And we talked to her about the body parts and all this other stuff and what they do. And I remember one day at summer camp, she took the book and she was going to Catholic school at the time. So it was a Catholic summer camp. They called us up on the phone. I thought she had fell and hurt herself. They was like, you got to come get her immediately. I zoom off to school and she is standing in a circle of girls who were all looking at the anatomy book. The nuns that worked there were afraid to take the book from her.
Oh my gosh.
It was like, she was branding some devil thing or something. I was like, what's the problem? She showed all the kids this book, and all the girls were all around her. They was laughing and giggling, and the nuns didn't know what to do about it. I was like, this is hilarious.
Wow.
But we made a conversation like that so taboo when it's so natural to life.
Yeah. What is the fear? Like what? That just this. This is intense. Like where we're going in this conversation is taking us to such an interesting place because, we talk about how what racism causes, right? And that disconnect. So think about, and it's not just racism, of course, it's patriarchy and classism and everything else, right? Everything that we talk about is homophobia. It's all tied together, right?
Right.
But what you're saying, and this is still a conversation around communication, is that we're so disconnected that we don't want to tell the truth about our own bodies, right?
I know.
And the people that are saying she can't have this book in this group have the same body. Like we're so disconnected from our own bodies that we're scared of our own bodies.
Right. Imagine
it's crazy.
That. Imagine that. So if we're afraid of our own bodies, what else are we afraid of that is so, nuanced into our life? What else? There's so many things. Like, for example, like race. We don't want to talk about race, even though race is all around us. We've created that reality. We don't want to talk about it. We just close our eyes. It's going to go away. It will go away if I just close my eyes and imagine that it's gone. No, it's not.
Right.
It has been a part of our society since the beginning of this construct we call America. And it's not going to go anywhere until you deal with it. You marching and protesting and putting up flags and saying, we're not for this conversation will not make the truth of the conversation go away. These conversations are not going anywhere. They will be here until we have them. Because the universe is trying to give us an opportunity to grow as human beings.
Right. What you're making me think of right now is all of these parents of white kids. Because you're right, it's the exact same thing, right? All these parents of all these white kids around the country, their fear is that their children will feel bad about themselves when they learn the truth about race and racism in this country, right?
Right.
And so, and I think one of the jobs for us, all of us as human beings, is also to listen with empathy too, right? Because I think one of the things that's happened, it's horrible right now, is that nobody is empathetic of the other side. The one side is not empathetic of the other. Like, I think it's important to understand, like, I kind of get why a white parent would feel that way. I don't agree with it, and I don't think it's helpful, because I think that's how most of us were raised. I was certainly raised that way. I was raised that way to feel great about this country. I was raised to feel, or not to learn anything about, the true history of how race and racism was built into the fiber of this country. And it actually made things worse for me. Just like if you don't actually learn about sex when you're a kid, you're way more likely to have teen pregnancy, right? If you don't know the truth about life, you're much more likely to make mistakes about not knowing about that truth. So the fact that we weren't communicated the truth about race and racism was much more confusing than if we had been told the truth right away. So there might be some initial pain. I certainly felt some initial pain when I, as a white person, when I learned the things that white people did that was done in the name of whiteness. And it was also an entree for me to later on learn the things that were even done to me, that whiteness was something done to me, right? As well. And that,
Right.
that there's pain there for me too. But if I had never heard the truth and faced the pain that I have of being connected to the negative oppression, it would never have been a liberating thing for me. Right.
Pain when associated with growth is not a bad thing.
Right.
It's just an indicator that you are going to the next level. So
Right.
it's like a snake shedding its skin. They say it's a very painful experience for the snake, but it's necessary for that snake to grow, for that snake to be happy. And we as human beings, we're probably the only ones that can run away from a conversation.
Hmm.
And
Say
to
more
our
what you mean by
detriment.
that. Say what you mean by that.
Well, in nature does not run away from a conversation.
Mm-hmm.
When the lion runs up on a gazelle, it can't run from that conversation.
Right.
You see all kind of situations like that in nature where you can't run from the conversation. We
Right.
choose to run from conversations, and we treat certain conversations as if the conversation itself can kill us.
Hmm.
When the only thing the conversation possibly can kill is your ego. And our ego makes us think that if our ego died, we died. You are not your ego.
Mm-hmm.
You are not the person you're pretending to be for other people. It's not who you are.
Mm-hmm.
You're not even white. You're not black. You're not
That's right.
brown. You're not Hispanic. That's not who you are. That's who the world said you were. But you cannot get to your real self until you have the conversations that have been holding you hostage. Because by
Mm.
having those conversations, you get to understand who you really are and find your true self. And when you find your true self, you find your power.
And the fear, you said it's virtual fear. Couldn't we also say it's manufactured fear?
Oh,
That it's
definitely
externally
manufactured.
manufactured, intentionally, right? It's
Yeah.
intentionally, externally manufactured fear, so that there are forces that don't want us to be in alignment with ourselves and in alignment with each other, right? This is something that's been put on all of us. And so when we talk about it being liberating, that's what we're saying we want to be liberated from, is these forces that have gotten us to fear things that are not to be, that really shouldn't be feared at all,
But
should be
listen,
embraced.
if you are a human being, you want to be with human beings.
Mm-hmm.
Humanity wants to be with humanity. It is not the
Mm-hmm.
nature of humanity to want to be apart from other human beings. It had to be manufactured because it was the only way a small percentage of people in the population could rule and take control over the masses. It had to split everybody else up. But
Right.
when racism was designed, it was designed to split people up, to prevent them from coming together. Because if that's the case, and that is, then people were together before then. Of
Right.
course, they had oppression. They had all situations around the planet where you had pockets of that stuff happening, but not like it is now. Not like it was during when slavery happened here in North America. Never had it ever been like that before. But that took some time to build up through the idea of socially constructing human beings being separate from each other. It's called race. It was socially constructed.
And it was socially constructed, and then it was communicated to all of us, right? And it's
Yes.
been communicated to us our whole lives. And it's interfered with our ability to be in good relationships with each other and also in good relationships with ourselves. That the level of disconnect, that we brought up earlier is, again, there's an intentional nature that we're coming to see and understand, that as we are disconnected from ourselves and we're disconnected from each other, we don't understand what true power is. So, we talk about at Soul Focus Group, Mahdi, we talk about the power of communication. And what we're saying is that communication, as it relates to relationships, the communication is power, because communication is getting us back to the state that we were before all of this stuff was miscommunicated to us. I don't know if that makes sense or not. It
Well, it
makes
makes
sense in
sense.
my
It
mind,
makes
but
sense to
but
me.
coming out.
It makes sense
Yeah,
to me because fear causes us to miscommunicate, especially the virtual fear causes us to miscommunicate. As John Gotti says, I will repeat. He said, I don't lie to nobody because I'm not afraid of nobody. It is the fear of people and the fear of a conversation that makes people lie. Every time you lie, if you listen to yourself, what you are doing is you are what? Succumbing to a fear.
yeah,
You may not admit to it. Even anger. See, anger is nothing but a mask you put on to hide fear. Hostility, violence. All you're doing is masking fear. It's fear in your life that you have never dealt with. Maybe it's the fear of past trauma that has not been dealt with and it keeps building up inside of you. So you become full of rage and anger. It's just the little boy or the little girl and you're just afraid. Still
yeah.
afraid, sitting in the corner, afraid of the same thing. You have to heal. And healing is a communication. It is a form of communication that goes deep within you to cause you to get back in touch with the pure you, the whole you, the
Mm-hmm.
you before the injury, the you before the hurt.
Mm-hmm. So I've said this to you before. I have this superpower not a lot of people know about, right? And I told you about this before. And that my superpower is that I can hear what people are saying when
Right,
they listen to it, even though they haven't listened to it yet, right?
right.
So I'm tapping into my superpower again, and the people that are listening to this, even though they haven't listened to it yet, one of the things that they're saying to me right now is they're saying, all right, Mahdi has mentioned twice now. He's mentioned John Gotti, right? Not being afraid. All right, John Gotti was this, major gangster, head of this huge family, this mafia family in New York, and had all of this power over people and weapons and all this stuff. So it was easy for him not to be afraid. But me, little humble listener of the Soul Focus Group podcast, how do I not have fear? Because I don't have all that stuff that John Gotti has. So make it, Mahdi, make it relative or relevant to that listener who's like has no connection to John Gotti whatsoever.
Well, I use John Gotti because John Gotti is just another human being like we are. And he said something that's profound and it stuck with
Right.
me. Right.
Right.
But see, here's the thing that you got to get fear has a partner that it brings with it wherever it goes. And the name of that partner is courage. Now, you can't get courage unless you face fear.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm gonna tell you this: there's no way around it. And there ain't no crystal ball. There's no secret. There's no shortcut to it. If
Yeah.
you are going to get courage, you're gonna have to face fear. And
Mm.
when you face fear, you get courage, and then you get enough courage, it brings you to trust. When you start trusting yourself, you don't need courage no more because you're back in trust. But
Mm.
there's no way around it, and there's no secret formula to you getting courage. See, courage is saying, look, I need you to stand up to this thing that's in your mind that you've made bigger than you. In the Indian culture, there's a story I read. It's like a sort of like a nursery rhyme about the elephant who's afraid of the mouse.
Mm.
So every time the elephant sees the mouse, the elephant runs and gets terrified. And the idea is that to the elephant, it's not a mouse. It's big as an elephant.
Mm.
But to us, we look at the elephant and the mouse and we say, I can't believe that big old elephant is afraid of that mouse because we are seeing the fear as its actual size. It's small as a mouse. But
Right.
to the person who is afraid, it really looks like an elephant.
Right.
So how did it get that big? It got that big because we imagined it to be that big.
Right.
So we have to revert, we have to get our imagination to work in this right going forward, where you imagine the right outcome for yourself. But to get that to start happening, to trigger it, you have to step toward courage. What is courage? I'm afraid, but I'm going anyway.
And everybody has it, is what you're saying. You don't have to
It
be
comes with
the
the
head of
fear. If you got the fear,
a boss of a family. Everybody has it.
everybody have it. If you have the fear, you have the courage. See, that's what I'm trying to tell you. The courage comes with the fear.
Mm.
And fear says, if you face me, I will reward you with courage. So if you're seeing a whole bunch of people who are being cowards, it's because they're not facing their fear. And you can't lie about that.
Right.
There's no way around that. If you face your fear, you will get courage. That is the reward that fear gives you. Ain't that beautiful how this universe is set up where everything is working in your favor if you turn and face it?
Mm. It's beautiful.
It really is. I started becoming a Pac-Man for my fear. I started hunting my fear. I was afraid, but I was going anyway. And everywhere I saw one of my fears, I'm going to get it. I'm running. I remember one time when I was in college, there was this big bodybuilder who said he was going to beat me up. And he was like 6'4", about 280. He said he was going to beat me up. My roommate said, what you going to do, roommate? I said, man, I don't know, but I'm going to face him. On the day it was time to face him, he was like 50 yards away from me. He bust out the student union and he said, Bird, I'm getting ready to kick your MF, pop, 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 pop. My roommate looked at me and said, what you going to do, roommate? I took out running toward him.
Mm.
And as I'm sprinting toward him, by the time I got to him, he said, oh, no, I don't want to fight. Why we can't talk it out?
Mm.
See, I was afraid, but I was running toward courage. And I said, if he beat me, I'm going to take the whipping, but it's going to stop today. And what I did is I took his heart. Why? Because every step I took toward that fear, it got smaller and smaller. And that elephant that it seemed like 50 yards away, when I got to him, he looked just like a mouse.
Mm.
Stop running from what you're afraid of and turn and face it. That's what we need right now in our world. For you to turn and face your fears and stop making them about other people when the fears are inside you. You created that elephant. You created that dragon. You created that demon. Nobody else created it but you. You sit around and imagine yourself being destroyed and imagine people talking about you and imagining people don't want you to succeed. That's in your head.
Mm-hmm. That's powerful, bro. I mean, it really is. And, I think the way the fear has manifested in most of us, there's a lot of different sayings. Marianne Williamson had her thing about our greatest fear is not that we are, I can't remember how it went, but not that we are small, but that we are powerful beyond measure. That most of us ultimately are scared of how powerful we really are.
Right.
And that's the trick that's been done to us, right? Is that we actually have been socialized to be scared of what we can do, not what we can't do.
Right. And that's the reason why fear rewards us with courage. Because
Right.
every step you take toward it, what it's trying to do is just wake up the power you have within you.
Right.
And you cannot wake up the power you have within you if you're drunk off fear. And so many people are drunk off of fear.
Mm-hmm.
Time to get sober.
That's right.
Remember, courage is I'm afraid, but I'm going anyway.
That's right. That's right. This has been an amazing conversation. Before we close out, Mahdi, if we can just wrap it up, just bring it kind of full circle, right? So we start out talking again about the biggest communication problem, and we talk about, active listening in relationships, which we've come to see is really just listening, right? That's redundant.
Right.
So tie that all together for us, right? So where we are right now, where we're talking about how the fear has disrupted our natural communication and our natural relationships. This is how we've come full circle in this conversation.
Right. So the fear, like we want to be liked so bad that our ego is afraid of people giving us real feedback about what they really feel about us or what they really think about us. And so we stop listening. We turn our listening off. So right now, as you said earlier, people aren't listening to each other. People aren't listening to themselves, which also means when it comes down to communication, they are not accurately representing their internal reality to people because they don't want the feedback that people will give them about their internal reality. So right now, the world is in a communication chaos because we're not communicating. We're just hollering and screaming at each other and nothing is being resolved. And overall, none of our problems are being solved because you can't solve your problems with ineffective communication. Communication must be effective to solve our problem, which is rooted in listening, real listening, which is tuning into what's being said behind what you hear. Real listening.
Beautiful, beautiful. So, this is what we ask you all to do. We ask you to tune into yourself, tune into everybody else. That's what it means to be soul focused, right, Mahdi? I mean, that's
Yes.
really what we're saying.
Yes.
That's what we're saying the soul focus is. So we're not trying to turn anybody into anything that you're not, or anyone that you're
Right.
not,
Right.
right? This is not about becoming a new person or anything else. It's just about tuning into who you really are and making that person available to the world in ways that you've never made that person available before, right? That's what we're doing.
Oh,
We're
yes.
making ourselves available to the world in ways we've never done before. And we're just asking the same from each of you.
Yeah, we see you. We see you, and we want you to just see you and
That's
to see
right.
the light that you came into this world to bring and embrace it. Don't let your fears overcome you, because your fears are really designed to work for you. Even your fears will work for you if you turn and face them.
That's right. That's right. And as Mahdi started, this podcast, or the first podcast that we, part one of this podcast, Mahdi said that we love you. And that's how we want to end too. We want you to know that we really do love each and every one of you who has made the decision to come on this journey with us, and whatever that looks like, whether it's just, this one podcast or every podcast, or, going to our website and looking at all of our different options, which are just going to keep growing and growing. And, Mahdi, we're in the process of revamping our website completely. It's going to be a little while, probably not until next year that we really roll out the brand new website, but it's going to have so much to offer, and we already have so much to offer. So we're just excited that you all are on this journey with us.
Definitely.
We can't tell you how excited we are, right?
Yes. Thank you so much for listening.
Absolutely.
And remember this, your voice matters.
And with that, we ask you to stay safe, stay well, and most of all, stay soul
focused.